Hi everyone, in this video we're going to do the second part of the writing section for the IELTS exam. There are only two videos in this section or in this series. Now we're going to see the writing strategy and question types. We're going to go question type by question type, like for specific question types. Okay, so the writing section, as you may remember from the last video, consists of two tasks. There is one descriptive task and one independent task, and they all together are about 60 minutes, and then we're going to go straight to the first task one. So the first task is going to ask you to describe something. In general, this is what you have to do. You have to just describe whatever they ask you to describe. You want to give a precise and complete description. You want to give sometimes an analysis of it. You want to write at least 150 words. Remember, it's at least, which doesn't mean that you have to write necessarily 150 words. You may write 152, 160, maybe 200 words, or you can write, 149 words. That's okay. And then the things that they may ask you to describe are going to be either a diagram, a graph, a table, a chart, or a map. Now, all these tasks, which is just one task, remember this is an or, all these tasks takes 20 minutes. So we're going to go to the first type of description. Is going to they're going to ask you to describe a diagram. So the diagram, what do they mean by a diagram? It's going to look something like this. It's going to be either a diagram explaining a process. In most cases, it's going to be explaining a process or explaining a situation. So you can see here, there's a diagram. There's no any kind of there's no description, there's only pictures. You have certain vocabulary here, you have certain vocabulary here and here, okay, like in some of the places. Basically what they're asking you is to describe this. So what is the question? What does the question look like? The question looks like this. The diagram illustrates how bees produce honey. So they're going to tell you what the diagram is about. So it's not like you have to guess what is going on. And then they're going to ask you to summarize the information. So you pretty much want to give all the information that it's there, and you want to report the main features and make comparisons where relevant. So yes, you're going to describe, but remember, you want to make comparisons. So you're going to do an extra analysis when you can. And then they're going to always tell you that you're going to write at least 150 words. Okay, so what should we do then when we see this? The thing that we want to do, we are going to start creating a draft. So before we start with the draft, the thing that we want to do is we want to number all the stages or the steps that are contained in the diagram. So in this specific case, for example, they're already numbered, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have 7 stages. So what you want to do is you want to make a list of those 7, because it means that you have 7 stages. So you're going to have to talk about 7 different things or 7 different scenarios. And then you want to describe each step with as much information as possible. So you have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then you want to put what you see in each of these. Now, this doesn't mean that the writing essay that you will deliver is going to be numbered like 1, this, 2. This is just so you can have your ideas in order. Now, when you're actually writing the draft, what you're going to do is you're going to connect all the previous information using connectors or transition words, which means, again, you're going to remove the numbers. Like it's not going to be 1, 2, 2. You're going to start using words like, and then the bees do this, or therefore, or then proceed to something like. You're going to pretty much connect these ideas using connectors. And then you want to describe the transitions as much as possible and with as little outside knowledge as possible, which means, remember, one of the principles that I've been telling you about is like the only information that they provide exists. So if you have extra information about this process, like let's say this is a 7-stage process, but maybe you know that between this and this, there's another step that is not here, is not in the diagram, just don't talk about it, okay? Like whatever extra information you may have about a specific process, just let it go. Okay, and then after you finish doing the draft, what you're going to do is you're going to write an introduction. Yes, the strategy that I promote here is that you write the introduction after you have finished everything, because sometimes people take too long to write an introduction. Like, I don't know if you have noticed this from maybe writing essays for school, but sometimes just writing the introduction takes a lot of time because you don't know what you just are going to write. But if you already have the thing that you wrote, then writing introduction is not going to be that it's not going to take that long. Okay, so you want to write an introduction and a conclusion. You want to check your grammar, spelling, and meaning at the end. This is what you do after you do the draft. And then you want to make sure you have all the information required. And then that's it. You deliver, right? Okay, so again, focusing on the specific example of the bees, we're going to go and see how we do it. So before the draft, we number all of them, right? There are 7 stages here for the 7 hexagons here, right? Okay, and we describe each of them. So we have the number 1, we have the bees and we have the hive, right? So bees build a hive made of cells. So how do I know that these are cells? Because in another part of the diagram, right, they are calling them cells. This is useful because sometimes you can use other parts of the diagram to get the information that you're going to kind of input in a different part of the diagram, right? So for example, here I know that this is the hive, right? And here it doesn't say hive. Here, this doesn't say hive. But I already know that this is the hive. So when I talk about, let's say, picture number 4, I can totally say that the bees go back to the hive. I don't have to say it, but I can say it, because even though the object here is not marked as being called hive, is definitely the same as number 1. So I can totally just use the same name. Okay, so I'm going to show you this. Okay, so bees build a hive made of cells. That's the first one. The second one, bees go to search for flowers. So you go and see they are going to search for flowers. The bees collect the nectar for the flowers. Bees go back to the hive and put the nectar in the cells. Again, they didn't have the word hive there, but they did have it in the first picture, so I can totally just use that one. A bee, just a single bee, bats its wings up and down because these are the arrows. This is important because if you notice here, they're not just giving you the picture of a bee there, but they're actually giving you the arrows, right? So you know they're moving, there's movement there. This is important because, again, not all of the description has to be just literally from what you see. You know, you don't say, yeah, there's a bee on top of the hive, that's it, right? And some air going on. No, you have to kind of interpret or analyze the pictures to see what's going on. Okay, hold on. Okay, and finally, water evaporates for the cells, and finally, honey is finally produced and can be collected. Okay, now this is something we do before the draft. Now, in the draft, what we're going to do is connect all of these pieces of information in a way that we can read it as a correct essay, right? So we basically are going to add words like initially, then, and, after, then, afterwards, in order to, and finally, right? This time I didn't put the full text, I just put 1. So if I say 1 is referring to this, bees build a hive. So I say, initially, bees build a hive made of cells, comma, then 2 and 3, right? So then bees go to search for flowers and bee collects nectar from the flowers. After 3 is done, so after collecting is done, blah, blah. So pretty much all I'm doing is connecting all the steps that I already described. So I just copy pasted it. I'm just using connectors, like regular language connectors, to make a comprehensive paragraph. Now, after I finish with this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce the introduction, which is basically a description of the process. So I'm going to say the diagram illustrates the process by which honey is produced, starting from the construction of the beehive and ending with the final product. And then I'm going to write down the draft, like the full draft that I just mentioned before. And then I'm going to end up with the conclusion, which is, and this is how finally honey is ready to be collected, right? Again, I just incorporated an introduction and a conclusion. And then after we do this, well, it's not here, but after we do this, we're going to check for grammar. For example, here, actually, this is an honest mistake that I made. I didn't put the S for illustrate. So if you write too fast, if you type too fast, you're going to make this type of mistake. So after you finish everything, after you provide the introduction, after you provide the conclusion, and you put everything with the body of the essay, you're going to start checking for the grammar. So here, for example, I'm missing an S. Maybe you see that you're missing a comma or something else. Again, this is something you want to leave for last. Why? Because if you don't have time to do this, it's okay as long as you do give the answer. Okay. Because yes, it's important, but it's not as important as answering the question. Okay, we're going to go to the second one. We're going to go to describe a graph, a table, or a chart. Okay, I'm putting them all together because they basically kind of the same. Okay, like yes, they're not exactly the same, but they are basically the same. So they're going to show you either a graph, they're going to show you a table, or they're going to show you a pie chart, or in this case, a bar chart. Okay, and they're all going to be comparing some sort of data from anything. For example, in this case, they are comparing the number of visitors through the years 1980 to 2015 for 5 different museums around the world. And then in this table, for example, they're talking about the percentage participation of women in senior management position in different companies from years 975 to 2015. And here they're talking about employment sectors of graduates from Brighton University in 2019. This time I'm not comparing different years, I'm comparing different sectors in a pie chart. And finally here I'm comparing 3 different years, like 2009, 2019, and the projection for 2029 for 5 different industries in Brazil, right? So if you see, they're all data. They're pretty much all data, which means there's not really much you can incorporate here. Like it's either 46% or it's not, right? It's not like you can say something like, yeah, it's kind of 46%. No, it is 46%. And in the case when you don't know exactly here, for example, it's definitely more than 30%, but you don't know exactly how much it is, right? And then again, you want to say just more than 30% or a little bit more than 30% or between 30 and 35%. So basically here, we're not supposed to just describe what we see. We're supposed to give an extra analysis because otherwise it will be too easy, right? To just describe what we see. So what does the question look like in this case? It looks like this. In the case of the graph, it's going to say the graph shows the number of blah, blah, blah. So they're going to tell you what the graph is describing. And then they're going to ask you to summarize the information, selecting and reporting the main features, and make comparisons. So remember, make comparisons when relevant, make comparisons where relevant, make comparisons where relevant. Why is this so important? Because they don't just want you to just describe it, they don't just want you to say something like, okay, so finance was almost more than 30% in 2009, it's going to be 35% in 2019, and it's projected to have more than 40% in 2029. No, what they want you to do is to start seeing how this data, like the information here, corresponds or interacts with this data. So it's good to say, for example, that the food processing industry had the least kind of percentage in the economies in 2009, right? And then it kind of went up, but then it went down again. So you're going to perform an extra analysis. Don't just describe the numbers. So we're going to go and see the strategy. The strategy is pretty similar, right? So before the draft, in this case, we number all the separate main information. So unlike the first diagram in which they pretty much provide the steps, like they tell us exactly how many steps there are. So for example, here in the B's, we have 7 steps. So we know we have to number 1 through 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then after we reach the 7th, we know that we have everything, right? Because there are only 7. So here, we don't know exactly how many there are. Like this doesn't mean that there are 5 or there are 15 because 3 per 5 is 15. Or it doesn't even say that you have 3 pieces of information. We don't really know. So what you want to do in your draft, you want to give yourself maybe around 5 minutes, from 3 to 5 minutes, to number all the possible information you can get, all the possible main information you can get from the graph. This implies implies the relationships, the similarities, the comparison, and the relevant analysis. So you give yourself 5 minutes to try to number all the information. And I do want you to number it because if you just write it without any order, you may get confused, you may kind of miss a point, or by the time you start writing your draft, you may just don't incorporate it. So you're gonna put like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, in this case, since there's no limit, you're pretty much going to give yourself a time limit, right? But be sure to find at least 10 of these main information points. Okay, then the draft part is pretty similar, exactly the same as before. You're going to connect the previous information, and then the extra thing, you're going to provide an analysis. The analysis, if you have already found everything on question 1, okay, you may already have the analysis. But if you couldn't find any analysis on the first step in which you have to number them, then maybe you have to find the analysis now. For example, here, if you already found the information, I was telling you that, okay, the finance was the, or it's projected to have the biggest increase here, and then manufacturer is the smallest. Okay, maybe you just complete like all the description in the first step, and then you couldn't do any analysis. But then by the time you start writing your draft, you start noticing some things. For example, that the finance, or the projected percentage for finance, that is more than 40%, is actually 8 times the projected for manufacturing, right? So that's a relationship. Just having the number 5 here and having the number 40 here creates a relationship that maybe you didn't find at the beginning when you were just numbering all the possible information, but you can find when you're starting writing the draft. Okay. So after the draft, just like before, we write the introduction, we write the conclusion, we check the grammar, spelling, and meaning, and we make sure to include the specific data, which is numbers and percentages. Unlike before, this time they have numbers, right? We have specific data. So if you say that finance is the projected for finance in 2019 is going to be 8 times the projected for manufacturing, you don't just say 8 times this. You're going to say it's going to be 8 times because finance is 40% or more than 40%, and manufacturing is 5%. Okay, so you do want to say exactly what is the number that corresponds to that, or the percentage or what have you. Okay. So we're gonna do the museums. Okay, so we're gonna go to the museums. What I want you to do now, I want you to create or go through the strategy with me. So I want you to first take a screenshot or pause the video for the strategy. Okay, for the first part of the strategy. Number all the separate meaning information and find relationships, similarities, comparisons, and relevant analysis. I want you to go here and pause the video for a minute. Okay, I'm not gonna pause it, but I want you to pause the video for a minute, okay, or take a screenshot so you can just work with this, okay. And I want you to pause it, okay, or take a screenshot again. And in 5 minutes, that's why I'm not pausing it, okay, I want you to give yourself 5 minutes to make your list. Again, make a list of all the possible information that you can get, not just numbers, but also relationships. So if some museum has twice the number of visitors as another museum, you want to put that information, right? Twice the number, or half the number, or increase or decrease the biggest, or decrease the least, etc. Okay, so pause the video, give yourself 5 minutes. We're going to continue. Okay, I'm going to show you the list. So this is my list. Like the Louvre has the most visitors at any time, the most, and then have Shenzhen has the least. I found the most, the least. I found the least in 2000. Oh, this should be 2015. And the Vatican has the biggest increase. So I just found the most visitors, the least visitors, the biggest increase, the smallest variation. And then I have something that has more than 2 times each of the others. That's a relationship between 2 museums. And then there's the only one that decreased from 2000 to 2015. Now, you don't have to have exactly these. You may have these plus some other information, or you may just have different information, but it has to look something like this, right? So if you see, I'm not just saying like, yes, this museum has this many visitors and this other has this many visitors. I'm actually finding relevant information. So the most, the least, the biggest increase, the smallest increase, the only one that decreased, because if all the other ones are increasing, then it's important that I single out the one that is decreasing. Okay, so we go and apply the strategy. Again, when we apply the strategy, we want to, well, I mix the draft and after draft, right? So I'm going to put the information together. I'm also going to create the introduction. So we have the introduction, the graph shows the number of visitors, blah, blah, blah. And then we have the actual body of the essay, right? So the museum with the greatest number of visitors throughout the years is the Louvre with almost 8 million. So I pretty much have the same information as here, the most visitors, but I'm adding the exact number with almost 8 million, right? In 1980 to almost 10 million in 2010. So I'm pretty much copying the same information, but I'm adding the exact numbers. I might have my introduction, and then I have my body. Another thing, remember, you want to copy or you want to check for the grammar and spelling and vocabulary at the end. You definitely want to check, but you want to check that at the end. Okay, now let's see the map. Remember, we're still in the first task. These are just all the possible kind of descriptions that you may have in the first task. We still haven't reached the second task. So the map. Basically, they show you a map. That's literally it. So usually the question goes like this. They show you two pictures of the same place and changes have been made, right? So basically they say, for example, this is University Campus in 2010 and this is the University Campus now. And there have been some modifications in this campus. So basically what you have to do is just write an essay, explain all the modifications. So it's like find the 7 differences game, right? So what does the question look like? It looks like this. The map shows improvements or modifications or what have you. And then the question is summarize information, report the main features, make comparisons. Exactly the same, right? So again, you may report the main features as the biggest changes, but in this case, you are going to apply a very similar strategy as the original diagram question, right? Because there are no like extra analysis to perform here. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to number all the differences or all the changes. So again, it's like the game of differences. And again, they are not telling us exactly how many there are. So we pretty much have to create the list on our own. So we do create a number list. So again, it's more orderly and it's easier to kind of put then in the body of the essay. Okay. But we don't have a specific number when we begin. So we pretty much have to be aware of how many we're counting. Then the draft, the same thing, connect the previous information, provide as much description. In this case, there's no extra analysis or no specific data. And after the draft, we write the introduction, we write the conclusion, we check grammar and spelling and meaning, and we make sure we have all the information. Again, there's no extra analysis or extra specific numbers to match. Okay, so again, I'm going to give you some time. I want you to take a screenshot of this or pause the video, okay? And you are going to give yourself 5 minutes to make a list of all the differences. Just make a list of all the differences. Again, my advice for you is to choose a specific order to go. So, for example, you can go clockwise. Oh, I'm not writing. You can either go. Oops. All right. You can either go clockwise or counterclockwise. So, you start here, then go here, then go here, then go here until you go to the end, or the opposite. But try to choose, or maybe you can just go by quadrants, like this first, then this, and this, and this, right? But whatever you do, make sure that you have covered all the possible modifications, okay? Like make sure that you're not missing anything. That's usually what we want to go in order. Okay. So again, pause the video for 5 minutes. Give yourself 5 minutes. I'm going to show you what the list looks like. Okay, here it is. So here is the list. I made a list of 9 items. So the first change, the student accommodation in the top left has extra buildings. So we go to the top left, right? So from here to here, we pretty much this building pretty much remain, and then there's an extra building. This is important because it's not like we change it, we just add it an extra building, right? So we never remove this building. Then we have this. Okay, university offices are replaced by science buildings. So you can see how the university offices here, right? The university offices here are going to be replaced by a science building. In this case, it's good I use the word replace because it's not like I'm adding the new building. It's like I'm completely removing this building and creating a new building here, right? And you can see how this is. So here, university or teaching block replaced by art. Again, I'm using the word replace because I'm completely removing one and adding another one. Then I have, so you can see, right? So I'm completely erasing this one and creating a new building, right? Then I have shops are replaced by student accommodation. So you go to the map again, and then you used to have the shops. Again, those are two little like tiny houses, and then it's replaced. They are replaced by student accommodation. Again, it's not like I'm adding, I'm completely like eliminating that and creating a new one. And then I have 5 new road next to the new student accommodation. This is the student accommodation in 4, right? So this is an important thing because this is not a new building, but it's definitely a modification, right? There used to be nothing here, and now there's a road. So yes, that's also part of the differences. Okay, then 6, restaurant building removed, replaced with tree. So yes, if you see, like there used to be a building here, and now there's an extra tree here. So yeah, it was literally like here to here. It was literally replaced by a tree. I'm gonna erase this because I know it's getting messy. Okay, and then we have we were here. Okay, and then we have the student accommodation building replaced with a bigger building for student facilities, shops, offices, etc. Yes, we can see this, how we used to have this building, and then this replaced by this. This is 7. Okay, and by then we have reached the end of all the buildings, but we're still missing some modifications, which are the center modifications, right? So we have the lawn and sitting area, have been removed. So you see, you used to have a green area, and now there's nothing, right? But there's a lake, and the lake remains. And since the lake remains, that's also part of what I'm going to write down. The lake remains. This is important because that's pretty much what I'm going to use for my conclusion. Okay, so after we did this, what we want to do is we want to write the essay connecting all this information. So we have first, the student accommodation building is now next to the blah, blah, blah. Right next to those, then I say number 2, which is the fact that university offices are replaced by science buildings, and then number 3 and number 4 and etc. And then we still like 6 and 7. You can check all of this. And then finally, we talk about what remained, right? While 9, and 9 is like the lake remains. So while the lake remained. Okay. And then after the draft, of course, we're going to add the introduction. The 2 maps presented show the changes, blah, blah. Then it goes like the body, like the draft, and then the conclusion. Actually, for the conclusion, it's enough that you have this. Like talking about the green areas while the lake remains, that's enough for a conclusion. And remember, after you have finished all of this, you can check for grammar and spelling and vocabulary. Okay, that is it for the first task. We're going to do the second task. So the second task is the independent opinion task. This is very similar to the independent task in the TOEFL. So they're going to ask you to answer a specific question or questions. They're going to ask you for an analysis and give your opinion. They're going to ask you for reasons and examples. They are going to ask you to write at least 250 words. Remember, it's okay if you write a little bit more. And this will take you 14 minutes. So what does the question look like? The question looks like this. They're going to give you a position. Like some people believe that a person's culture is defined by their cultural origin, while others believe that it has only a minor influence. And then they ask you, okay, discuss both views and give your opinion. Always, what the alternatives are there close? To what extent do you agree or disagree with this opinion? So they will always present a position or maybe more than one position, and then they're going to ask you for your opinion, right? So sometimes it's like your open opinion, like give your opinion openly, or sometimes they are pretty much asking you for your specific opinion taken aside, like what are the alternatives to SUS? Like maybe you don't want to give up on SUS, maybe you don't want to close SUS, but they are already asking you to look for alternatives to SUS. So it's not for you to say whether you should look for alternatives to SUS or not. You have to look for them. Okay, the strategy to follow, again, is very similar to the previous strategies, but we're not going to number kind of steps or information, right? But we are kind of numbering a couple of things. Okay, so before the draft, you have to have an opinion. Again, if you don't have an opinion, just create one. Pretend you're someone else, flip a coin, pretend you care. You just have to have an opinion. Remember, you want to answer all the questions, which is important because sometimes there are more than one question. Like sometimes are telling you like here, for example, what problems do SUS bring? So, and then are telling you what alternatives do you have? So there's not just one question for the alternatives. There are 2 questions here. So be sure to answer all the questions that are there. Okay, and then you also want to make a list all the possible reasons and examples. So in the case of the questions, if the question is asking you to pretty much give more than one answer, for example, here they're asking you for all the problems, right? Like what are the problems? So it's not just one problem, so many problems. You want to make a list of all the problems. If they ask you what are the alternatives, you want to make a list of all the possible alternatives, right? So basically, you're still going to make a list. Okay, then everything remains. When you have the draft, you connect the information that you already put in your list, and then you provide a description. And after the draft, you write the introduction, you write the conclusion, you check your grammar, spelling, and meaning, and you make sure that you have all the information. Okay, we're gonna go with this Sue question. I want you to read this Sue question. Okay, again, you can take a screenshot, you can just pause the video. Okay, pause the video for like here, pause for 5 minutes. Okay, like give yourself 5 minutes to read this and just create the list. Okay, just in 5 minutes create the list to answer for what problems, like make a list of all the possible problems and make a list of all the possible alternatives. Okay, pause the video right now, give yourself 5 minutes, and then come back and we're gonna check. Okay, so I'm going to show you my list. Again, your list doesn't have to look exactly like this. There's not a limit or a specific number of possible problems or alternatives. This is just kind of a guideline. So this is my list. I made one list for the problems and I made one list for alternatives. So what are the problems? The first problem that I found is like animals suffer in zoos. A second problem is that disease. There are certain diseases that are caused by animals. You have seen this in COVID cases. Like these are like originally from animals. Another reason is that humans can't see the true animal behavior because like behavior of animals in the zoos is not really how they behave in nature. And finally, that children don't learn correctly. You may say that D and C are pretty much the same idea. So yeah, they're pretty much related. And as alternative to zoos, I can see that there are natural sanctuaries when you can see the animals in real life, like in their real habitat. There are National Geographic videos, so you can just sit down and watch videos. There are field trips, which means you can just go to the original place in which the animals live. And there's virtual reality. I try to get a little bit like high tech here. Still an alternative, right? Now remember, the draft, since the question is they're asking you what are the problems and what are the alternatives. Basically, we're just pretty much going to say this, all the problems and all the alternatives, right? So the draft is just joining these two lists using the correct connectors and using the appropriate filling words. So we start with like, there are many problems associated with zoos, for example, and then I start with the problems like A, B, C, D, right? But I don't just list them. I kind of give you extra information. Say A, which is unnecessary because my first problem was the animals suffer. Okay, but maybe just saying the first problem is that animals suffer is not enough. So I'm going to try to complete the idea around the idea, saying an extra thing like which is unnecessary. And there's also B, which refer to diseases caused by animals, which have taken relevance since the recent coronavirus outbreak. So I'm giving you extra information to kind of make a more rounded idea. Okay, so if zoos were closed, we could A, B, C, or D, which are the list for the alternatives. So if the zoos closed, because that's the second question, right? Like what are the alternative zoos if they are closed? So I'm pretty much just answering that question. So if zoos are closed, A, B, C, and D. And then we write the draft, and then after the draft, we incorporate the introduction and the conclusion. You don't have to write literally the expression in conclusion, but it's okay. It's just to show you, to signal that I'm writing the conclusion. Okay, and that's it. Now, remember I was telling you to be specific. Okay, so again, if they're asking you for the problems and for the alternatives, just go ahead and answer with the problems and with alternatives. So if you can give like specific examples. So animals suffer, for example. There's a case in a certain country where all the animals got depressed and stopped eating because they were suffering so much. And the alternatives like virtual reality, for example, I have a video game that shows us animals in the real natural habitats. Okay, you can totally add the information, but be very careful of answering the specific questions. So if they're asking you for the problems for zoos, you don't want to start talking about the problems for animals in general. So you don't want to say, but zoos are only part of the problem because circuses also have animals and they suffer too, but they are not asking you about circus, right? So they're only asking you about the zoos. So that's important. That's a part of being specific. And again, as an alternative, it's an alternative to zoos. So you don't want to say, go and say, yes, so we should all go vegetarian because that way no animal will suffer. But no, because the specific question was only about the animals in zoos. So remember, only answer the specific question that they're asking. Remember to check your grammar and spelling last. This is very important. Some people get really kind of anxious to be writing or having a bad grammar or bad spelling. But remember, yes, it is important, but it's not that important, so leave it for last. Mind your time, be checking all the time. Again, the time should be something like you should have 5 minutes for the pre-draft, like the list. I'm going to put the word list. 5 minutes for the list, okay? In the first, for example, the first one is 20 minutes, remember? So then you want to have 10 to 15 minutes for the draft and post-draft. Okay, so that's the 10 to 20 minutes. Now, the second task, you want to have 5 minutes for the list still. You want to have 10 to 15 minutes for the draft itself. Then you want to have 5 minutes for the post-draft. And the rest will be just checking. Okay, so if you use most of all these times, okay, you have just 25 minutes, which is going to give you 15 minutes for adding extra information. Okay, recommended material. I do recommend that you take an official IELTS exam. Okay, an official IELTS practice test. I also recommend you that you look for full writing practice tests online. I'm going to put the links in the description. And I do also recommend that you have a writing partner. So if you cannot hire a tutor, maybe just get another person who's taking the IELTS with you. And so you can check their writing and they can check yours. And if you can't, just get a tutor or an academy for this. And again, try to study most of this on your own until you really, really need someone to tutor you. Okay, so that's it. We have finished the writing section of the IELTS. We're going to continue with the speaking section, and that will be it for the whole IELTS preparation series. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and write any questions that you may have in the comments, and I will answer them. Okay, bye.